And then let's go to William Shakespeare. Now, in leadership,
Are
this
you
course,
this
go to
one?
William Shakespeare. Yeah, that's it. This is
Okay.
it. Okay.
Okay.
I found William Shakespeare's plays enormously helpful in illustrating what leadership is. Okay, so you know about William Shakespeare, so I will not go into detail. Let's go to next. Now I choose five plays. About number one is Romeo and Juliet. Of course, Romeo and Juliet is probably in their 20s, and this passionate and beautiful love, and that ends in tragedy. Hamlet is probably in 30s, about the Denmark prince story. Is really talk about in the issues in 30s about your private role and public role as a prince. I think that is a very good way to illustrate. Othello is the more general, very accomplished. In your 30s and 40s, you have accomplished something. At the time, the issue of trust is very, very important. Then Julius Caesar is later, I think he was about 60 years old. He was in the climax of his this glory, human glory. And then I think he did not do a few things right. So is the later stage, and King Lear is final stage of life. What is like how the people really ends a life. So the key here is that all these characters, number one, highly successful. Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Othello, Julius Caesar, highly successful. But because of the decisions they made on certain stage of life is such that they ended in tragedy. But the reason why this Shakespeare's play is so appealing is that what they experience, what they actually present, is a very, in a sense, common to many people's lives. So it really is a classic. So when I give lectures in either India or Europe or in Korea, in any countries, when I talk about William Shakespeare's plays, people understand. Okay, all right. So let's move on next. Now, first one is Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, I don't want to go into all details, but I think Romeo and Juliet, there's two hostile families, rival families, and they are fight, and then then Romeo and Juliet fell in love, but Romeo actually killed these Juliet's families in this Tybalt, and then Romeo is banished, and then Juliet told, okay, you cannot, you actually marry the person, our family, the clan approves, and then somehow Juliet takes his life, and both of them died, and then these two families just end the feud. Stories are complex, but at least the storylines go like this. Let's move on next. So the key story themes here is Romeo and Juliet chose a tragic death with the impossibility of realizing their romantic love. There's no way this. So I think that's what practical is challenging the point. But I was in 20s. I love I also involved in there's a long story about woman and so forth. But I think at that point, in 20s, because love is so important. But what if they had a better sense of identity and find out like purpose larger than their romantic love? There might be some different, but I think that's simply a hypothetical question. But the point of the key story themes is that Romeo and Juliet, there was encounters are there, attraction, growth in love, but in two family feuds, long, insurmountable, incompatible obstacles, and the enormous efforts in genuine love. But I think there is a tragic and conflict choices and closure. And that's the storyline of this. Let's move on next. Next, please. Okay. So notable lessons in leadership is in 20s, romantic love and passion might be the most precious, beautiful, important of all. Okay, many think that way. And great love story is always moving, but great love stories have terrifying obstacles and barriers. And then question here is romantic love, although it's very wonderful and beautiful, is this the highest value from entire life standpoint? And what is the role of a large and higher life purpose and romantic love? I think that is something we consider. So in 20s when they try to just live out their lives and whatever they think in their youthful passion, and then what is the higher purpose of life, and so forth, is a very important questions. Okay, all right. Okay, let's move on. Next. Now, I came across the Paul Turnier's book in my late 20s. And when I start the first missionary life here, I didn't have any real training in counseling and pastoral care and so forth. But Paul Tournier is a Swiss physician and author. He's a psychologist. But I first read his couple of his books. After that, I really enjoy reading. He seems to talking about what goes on in my life, in my internal world, very in a keen way. So I start reading most of his books. So one of the books that was really impressed. Let's go to the next one. Okay, please next. And Napoleon's worldview. That definitely was Christian, but it's not a literally very narrow-minded fundamentalist. But I think he was a Christian and tried to really see the world, the biblical teaching very seriously, but at the same time, he tried to see the internal struggles of people with a tremendous compassion and realism. All right, so that's I think the point. So let's move on to the next. The particularly this book, Strong and the Weak. The reason why among these many books, I really recommend this one here is in my youth, in my junior high and high school, one of the key challenges I had is I was very short, as I was not bully, and I was bully, and so I was not very active, kind of leadership. That's what I want to do. So I'm a timid person, so I had a lot of weakness. And then my family, because of my family background, my father is not at home. My mother work all the time. So my family had basically no visitors, nobody. And so relationally, I was very, very deficient. And so when I come to final college, I was really scared what my life would be like. And then on top of that, I had this prolonged physical illness with eye disease, and then this lung problem and so forth. So I had a very little hope. Could I really live beyond 30 years of age? So in that, this real big self doubt. That time I read the book Strong and Weak. I think the point of this book is very simple. What people regard as strength and weakness is very relative. But I think whatever we people really think of weakness actually turn into strength. And so strength and weakness is not something we are to be so proud of, so ashamed of. I think this is what we are in this fallen world. And so great deal of acceptance of ourselves is the very beginning of self-care and then finding one's identity and purpose. It has a tremendous consolation for me. So that's why this choose this strong and weak, especially in the first stage of formation of life, formation of identity, purpose, and defining one's identity. Okay, so let's move on next. And the Portian is a member of quotes. I think it's just very meaningful words. So because of time constraint, I cannot, go over this. But even the idea of acceptance at the heart of personality is the need to feel a sense of being lovable without having to qualify for that acceptance. I think that's the key of a pastoral care. And as we really engage in one-to-one studies, whatever, we don't have to allow based on people what they do. I think they are just being there is very important. But in my 20s, it's not easy to do that. And I love people for what they do more than who they are. But I think that is a very meaningful this point. This marriage, if you look in almost the in the middle, marriage teaches you loyalty, forbearance, self-reliance, meekness, and great many other things you wouldn't need if you have stayed single. I think that's really true. So through marriage with my wife, I think I learned great deal about this growth. So anyway, let's move on next, okay? Another point is the Machiavelli's book, this Prince. People really regard Machiavelli as a very evil, and it's not necessarily very pro-Christian. So many Christians regard reading Machiavelli is really something you should not do. But I think otherwise. The Machiavelli is really explain the reality of life here. And so Machiavelli was actually the book Prince is advising leaders. What do you do when you become a leader? You have to protect your people, your city, and your world against these hostile wolves out there. What exactly we need to do? So I think he really teaches practical tools and practical attitude, not necessarily evil, but what exactly you need to do. So let's go to next. Next. So I mean Machiavelli, and there is a this is about 5 or 6, 7 minutes because of timing. I cannot show this, but after this class, maybe tomorrow or tonight, you just click this Machiavelli. It's only just no more than 10 minutes. It actually shows what Machiavelli is about, why this really makes sense. Okay, now so in Christian life, we really need to have this clear understanding of what this ideal, God's call, God's purpose, and so forth. But at the same time, we are on the floor, our feet is in the world, so we need to understand what it means to live in this world. Now, the interesting illustration I want to do this, when I received the missionary training in Korea, I think there's a number of different training, but one training is how to talk, how to talk, okay, like how to engage in conversation training. I think that is so. In other words, when you meet total strangers, how you engage in conversation, and then when you go into totally different culture, what exactly you need to engage. I think that is one training. Another one is the missionaries all receive a boxing training. Okay, I personally practice martial arts, so I know how to fight. But we were, told to go and then practice boxing. So I had no idea what this boxing training has to do with the missionary training. But through boxing training, I learned what it means to be beaten, but also what it means to really attack. But I never use boxing or the martial skills. But the point is that in this world, just you are always taught what it means to be good without understanding how to respond what is to be bad. I mean, this you don't have to be bad, but how you respond to bad and evilness in the world. And then we just educate children only to be good. They'll have a tremendous hardship in this world. But anyway, that is one side. The point, anyway, Machiavelli has some good things we can learn. Okay, let's move on next. So this final conclusion, and that's Machiavelli, this memorable quotes like appearance. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what really are. I mean, that's what the reality is, right? So that's why appearance important as much as a substance. And then there is other good these quotations about wisdom, right? Okay. All right, let's move on next, and then I will stop, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. Now, key point here is Bible is the book of the leaders. So we look at Bible as a text for leadership. Next one is a leadership's life-changing process, identity in the first stage of formation. Interest is for development, insight of acquisition of your expertise, and then the competence. Integrity is implementing your life leadership principles, and finally influence discharge. And so three leadership assumptions about leaders are followers. There's what I call idealism and realism, and there is a life stages. So you are all in a wonderful this stage of formation and identity in the first stage. And so you really think about what is your life purpose and goal, but how do you define yourself? Who are you? How what to do about your strength, but mostly what do you about your weaknesses, and then how you really handle these commands in the Bible to be good, to be holy, and so forth. But at the same time, you live in this world. How you deal with these worldly demands and the worldly this influence. That's not necessarily good. How do you deal with the badness of this world? So I think that is the first important, these key questions in your first life. So I will stop here, and then let's talk about a couple of things. Okay. Okay. Let's stop and then let's look at each other, and then so yeah. So let's stop